He's joining me now, Bill Press from the left, syndicated radio talk show host, White House correspondent, my debate mate when we go on Don Lemon, although Don got tired of me, I guess. So I haven't been on there in a while, but now I do Chris Cuomo, so I got to put a plug in for Bill there. And he's also the author of his memoirs that have just come out. This is a cool book. You got to read it. From the Left, A Life in the Crossfire, from Bill Press. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at your favorite bookstore. From the Left, A Life in the Crossfire. And joining us now, syndicated radio talk show host, columnist, White House correspondent, you name it, he's done it. Bill Press. Good to have you, Bill.
Hey, John, how are you? Good to talk to you.
Good,
Happy,
man.
4th of July week, huh?
I know, holiday weekend and all that good stuff. And
yeah, you and I are working. Congress is.
I know, they don't do anything, right? But we're, and I got to tell this story. So Bill and I, we both have a show in the morning. And, of course, Bill is one of the final remaining liberal talk show hosts on syndicated radio in America. He's like, I think there's only 3 of them, you and Stephanie, and I think that's it. I think there's 2.
And Tom Hartman, there are 3.
And Tom Hartman, there's 3. So Bill's on, so I can just tell everybody, he's on 6 to 9. I'm on 6 to 10. So we were both at the Philadelphia convention, the Democratic National Convention, and where was it? At the Spectrum, I guess, in Philadelphia, or whatever they call the basketball stadium now. So you had to get there at 4, get in, get through security. Remember, Bill, they had us packed in there like so.
Oh, my God.
It was
cheek by jowl. Right? It was the worst workspace I think I've ever worked in.
It was like,
right?
and we were right by each other, and so we were bleeding into each other's shows. I mean, we couldn't help it.
I know. People were. They thought I'd gone right wing because all they could hear was you, and then I'm sure your audience was saying, "Who's that?"
They were like saying, "Who is that guy?" And then some of them were saying,
"Lefty," right?
Some of them were saying, "Well, for Fredericks is for Clinton now," or something. So anyway, that was fun, Bill. We had a good time, and glad to have you there. So look, I was excited to have you on today because the state of the Democratic Party right now. You just elected a new nominee in New York that beat Joe Crowley, who's a socialist, and then Tom Perez came out and said she's the future of the party, and you've got members of your party calling for the abolition of ICE, which basically means to me you have no borders. What's the deal here, Bill?
Listen, first of all, I want to point out that Tom Perez said that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the future of the Democratic Party. He said that on my show.
Right, that's why I'm having you on.
He said that on my show on Monday or Tuesday morning, right? So we're making news here, John. That's what it's all about, right?
And we ran your clip, didn't we, Mike?
Seriously, I think the Democratic Party is in better shape than it's ever been in a long time, at any rate. And I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the future of the is the future of the Democratic Party. She's young, she's a progressive, she's talking about the issues that people care about, and she knocked off, by the way, a good guy, but a guy who's been there 20-some years, lost touch with the district, who represents the Democratic Party establishment. And I think there's something going on in the Democratic Party that went on in the Republican Party, which is Donald Trump certainly was no establishment Republican, and people were tired of that kind of elitist Republican leadership. I think a lot of Democrats are tired of the elitist Democratic leadership. I supported Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I did, because I just felt that the Clintons had been around too long, and Washington, it was all top-down on both parties, and we needed to shake it up. So she shook it up.
Do you think Sanders got screwed?
Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. No, there's no doubt. We know for a fact now that the DNC had made a deal under, what's her name?
Wasserman Schultz.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, thank you. Yeah, had made a deal with Hillary Clinton, with the Clinton campaign. They were raising money, which was supposedly was all for the DNC, and they were splitting that money with the Clinton campaign. The emails show that the staff there was trying to undermine Bernie any way they could. the fact that they scheduled so few debates and they did them on nights when everybody else would have been watching basketball or baseball. No, they went out of their way to screw Bernie. And by the way, some of them still don't accept Bernie Sanders because he hasn't been a lifelong Democrat.
Mm-hmm. So,
and we ended up nominating the wrong. That's my opinion. The party ended up nominating the wrong candidate, and the candidate who did not, unlike Bernie Sanders and unlike Donald Trump, did not have a message for our time and for the working class, middle class Americans who really felt left out. And
so
still feel that way.
So, look, Bill, I agree with you there. And certainly there's a movement now in the Democratic Party amongst your base that we had, because, I was for Trump the whole time since even before he got in 2015, because I'm not an establishment Republican, and I like tariffs, and I'm a protectionist, so it all fits in, and I want to get out of these wars, so that was my appeal. But we already had our movement. So what you're saying is this is a movement now, right? Because I have to say this, I might not agree with it, but you do not have a message.
By the way, it is. I do think it is a movement, and when I first sat down with Bernie Sanders and talked to him about the rumors that he might want to run for president, what Bernie wanted more than anything was to start a movement, right? Mm-hmm. And he wanted to get the message out. He started out as a message candidate. Well, then he realized how weak Hillary was, and he thought, maybe I might even be able to win this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when that didn't happen, he still wanted to start a movement. Now, it's not just Bernie, but I think what we're seeing today is more energy and more excitement and more enthusiasm than I've seen in politics since, the Vietnam War protests. Mm-hmm. And it's all, what I love about it, it's all grassroots. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, it's sort of like the Tea Party was for the Republican Party, what was that, 10 years ago,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And now you're seeing it. I mean, there are more women running, there are more young people running, there are more people of color running, mm-hmm. and there are more progressives running, and they're running for city council and for state legislature, and I think it's very exciting. I think it's going to make a difference.
When I went to Iowa to cover the campaign in, I guess it was 2016 January, I did my show from Iowa for a week, and I've told the story many times. I stayed at the Holiday Inn at the Des Moines Airport. No particular reason, got a good rate. That's where I stayed. Well, that was, it was no planning in that. Well, that was where the Bernie Sanders campaign stayed, by happenstance. So I was there a week with them, and they would go out on the bus during the day, and then they'd come back. And I was there a week with them at the hotel, and he would come in with his wife in the evening after the bus, Jane, and they'd go to the bar, and he'd buy people beers. He was a fun guy. And his wife, absolute lovely person.
Oh, Jane is great.
She's great. And then I got to talking to him, and they invited me on the bus one day. So that was fun.
Really?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I had fun. And that's when I predicted that he was going to win. I said, this guy is going to beat her, because spending a week there at that hotel with his supporters and the level of enthusiasm was so energizing, even for me being on the other side. It was just energetic. And I'm like, I don't see this at the Clinton campaign. Those are all operatives. So I said then, I was saying on the air, this guy's going to win. And had it been fair, I think he wins and he's the nominee. And I'm not sure that our guy would have beaten him. I think it would have been tougher for Trump to win some of those states if Bernie was there. So for us, it worked out.
I agree. And, people always ask me, would Bernie have won if he were the nominee? I believe he would have, but I'm not sure. I may be wrong. But I'll tell you one thing. He would have campaigned in Wisconsin.
Say that for sure.
He would have campaigned in Pennsylvania, and he would have campaigned in Michigan, and he would have campaigned in Ohio, and he would have campaigned in the heartland where Hillary Clinton did not.
So
Go ahead.
Okay, so for the Democrats now, Bill, and by the way, we're with syndicated radio talk show host Bill Press, and by the way, he's just come out with his new memoir. It's called From the Left, A Life in the Crossfire. Got to buy this. You can get it on Amazon or your local bookstore. From the Left, A Life in the Crossfire. And if anybody has been in the crossfire for a career, it's Bill Press. So, Bill,
Thank you. By the way, I call this memoir part 1 because, like you, I'm not about to hang up my spurs, man. I got a lot of life left and a lot of good times left. But I just wanted to kind of tell some of the fun stuff that I've been able to do and people that I've worked with so far. But long way to go.
Well, that's it. And so it's memoir part 1. So we're going to look for memoir part 2 pretty soon after that, Bill. So look, Bill, now though you've got your party calling for 3 things, right, that I've just seen. Number 1, they're calling for get rid of ICE, which basically, and they're chanting no borders, no nation, no deportation. So basically they don't want a United States, I suppose. Yeah. Second thing they're calling for is to get rid of the Trump tax cuts, which, are showing up in people's paycheck and wallets. And the third thing now is you've got Keith Ellison from Minnesota deputy DNC chair calling for nationalizing medicine. So that seems to be the message. I mean, is that really in the mainstream, Bill?
Well, first of all, I think all 3 of those are solid. I must say, John, to be honest, Keith's a good friend of mine. I haven't seen what he has said about nationalizing medicine. If he's talking about Medicare for all, is that what? So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, he's saying that the Democratic platform going forward, we just played his clip earlier today, was that the U.S. should go to a single-payer system.
Well, he's talking about Medicare for all. Okay,
right.
Yeah. All right. Let me just say first of all, I think all 3 of those are solid positions. Number 1, what Democrats are saying about ICE is this: yes, you need an enforcement mechanism for the Border Patrol, but ICE has only been around since 2003. So let's not think of this as as sacred as the Constitution of the United States. If it's wrong, we ought to fix it. And I think it is wrong today when you see this ripping these families apart of kids from their parents. Alex Azar yesterday, the HHS secretary, was defending this practice, saying, well, the kids who are 0 to 4, they're his words, toddlers, we're talking about 0 to 4 years old, are in facilities that are only about a mile or a mile and a half from their parents. So he said, what's the big deal? That is a big deal for the United States. That's cruel, that's inhumane. And I think what Democrats are saying, let me give you a phrase, John, you may recognize, repeal and replace. They're not saying there's no ICE at all. They're saying, let's get rid of the ICE as it is today and replace it or reform it or with an agency that does its job, but does so in a civilized, in a humane way, and doesn't practice go around reminding people of stormtroopers, which they've been compared to. On the second thing about the tax cuts, I think what Democrats are saying is not get rid of the tax cuts, but these tax cuts, as you say, which are piddly for anybody in the middle class, as you know, John, are going to disappear. The tax cuts for the big corporations remain permanent. The Democrats are saying, let's give the middle class, working class Americans, as Donald Trump promised to do and didn't, a healthy tax cut that's going to stay in place and give them more money at the end of the month to pay the bills. And as far as Medicare for all goes, let me tell you, I think that's a winning issue for Democrats. I mean, they used to call it single payer, now they call it Medicare for all. But look how many millions of Americans have been helped, belong to Medicare. It works. It's cost efficient. The only thing wrong with it is you can't, in my opinion, what's wrong with it is you cannot negotiate for the price of prescription drugs under Medicare because the pharmaceutical companies own the Congress. We changed that, but if it worked for people over 65, it'll work for people over 55, over 45, over 35, and I think the way to start is by, and even Hillary Clinton said this, lower the eligible age for Medicare from 65 to 55, and then keep going until everybody's covered by Medicare.
Well, and even Vice Presidential Candidate and Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, has an interesting proposal, which is give people the option to opt in to Medicaid. Like they could simply opt in for a fee, and that would put their skin in the game. And
you know what? Let me just
that isn't a bad idea.
Because that's called. Just making sure we got enough time here, but that's called the public plan option.
Yes.
And you may remember, but the last book I wrote was a book called Buyer's Remorse, which was a book critical of the Obama administration.
Right.
And one of the points I made in that is the public plan option was part of Obamacare that President Obama sold to the American people, and then he dropped it like a hot rock, and I think he made a huge mistake. That should have been part of Obamacare, giving people the option, instead of buying private insurance, to buy into Medicare.
Look, anytime people have the option to buy something, if you don't like it, don't buy it, right? I mean, it's simple, right?
Yeah.
Don't buy it. It's like if you don't like my radio show, then tune in someone else. I mean, it's pretty easy to do. You've got a lot of options as long as you have the option. I just want to make one comment on ICE that I've made on TV for 2 weeks that really bothers me about this mantra of kids in cages and ripping kids away. I mean, right now we have a justice system, Bill, in the United States where if you're in any city right now, anywhere in the U.S., and you leave your children, you go to the Wawa, say, right? And you're looking at lottery tickets and you're buying cigarettes, you get caught up in a conversation, and your two kids are in the car, and somebody makes a phone call, right? They come in, and you get handcuffed for leaving your kids in the car or for shoplifting, and you've got kids in tow. You haven't been charged with anything. There's no due process. Well, you go to jail to get processed. They take your children, your minor children, in tow, and they put them in a child services facility. And Bill, if you can't make bail, if you can't make cash bail, which is a whole other issue that I'm opposed to, if you can't make cash bail, you sit in jail for 90 days, and your children, if you're a single mom or dad, are gone. They're taken from you. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is, first of all, I'm not defending that practice either, by
That's
the way.
A horrible
like
practice.
you, I'm offended by a whole lot of it. But these people at the border, they're not abandoning their children. They're coming with their children. They're seeking refuge. They're seeking asylum. And automatically, when they cross the border under the Trump policy, he has said there's no due process. They are automatically treated as criminals.
Because when you come over the border illegally, you're a criminal, Bill.
No, you're not. No,
yes, you are. You're breaking the law.
It's a civil offense. No, John, you're wrong. It is not a criminal offense. At best, it's a civil offense. They're thrown into prison like criminals, and their kids are taken away from them and put in another facility, which is sometimes 3,000, 5,000 miles away. It is absolutely cruel and inhumane and un-American, and we should not be treating people like that.
So if they wanted asylum, there are, on the southern border, there's 82 ports of entry, Bill, right? 82 of them. There's 3 of them in San Diego alone. If they wanted asylum, why don't they just go through the U.S. process, go to the entry area and ask for asylum, go through the paperwork. They're not separated from their children. They're not arrested. They're put in housing until we can figure it out. When they come over the border illegally, they've broke the law, Bill.
But you know as well as I, that's the case that Secretary Nielsen tried to make at that news conference, a briefing rather, where you were probably there. I watched it on television that day. But it's not the case. I mean, many people have shown, reporters have been down there and shown that at these legal asylum or places, ports of entry as you call them, right, or as we call them, they're not processing people who are seeking asylum. They're turning them away, or they're saying you've got to wait for 3 weeks, and there's no place for them to wait for 3 weeks. So the ports, the reason some of the people cross illegally because the ports of entry are not working the way they should. But again, if they come across, they are not coming across that border is not a criminal offense, and certainly you don't take the kids, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, away from their parents. I mean, I don't think there's any way you can defend that.
All right. And we're out of time, but
hey,
look, we
I'll
can
see you on TV.
We can have this discussion.
I hope. Let's get on this. Get Don Lemon back on the job here.
I'm going to send him an email. I don't know what happened. They said that they were on to legal stuff and things like that. But yeah, we need to get back on. I want to thank you for being with us today, Bill Press.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks,
thank
John.
you.
Good to talk.